that's what I think is really interesting. Everybody knows there's no rape crisis. We have never had more young women lining up to go to university. We've got, 60% of graduates are female. Would all these families be sending their daughters to our universities if anyone remotely believed we have a major rape problem?
Okay. Well, let's get into it a bit then. Let's get into, do we have a campus rape problem? Now, there was a website I was looking at today. It's called women.com.au. It's spelled WHIMN, I guess because they also don't have the word men in the woman spelling. They said of the 31,000 students at 39 Australian universities surveyed by the Australian Human Rights Commission, 1.6% had been sexually assaulted in a university setting, compared to just 0.092 of the average university population. This means that young women at universities are 17 times more likely to be raped than those in the general population.
That's actually totally wrong. It's 1.6% over 2 years, so that's 0.8% over 1 year. I've got the figures from the New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics that shows universities are 100 times safer than the general population when it comes to
there is a point from your book. I think this one might be an American statistic, but it says that young women who don't attend college are victims of sexual violence at a rate about 30% greater than their more educated counterparts.
That's an American figure, yeah. Surveys everywhere. Or when you have proper data, it shows universities are very safe places compared to, Indigenous communities, compared to places we know where young women are really at risk. And if you talk to people in the general community, everyone would say, yes, of course that's true. We would hope that's true. We're dealing with educated young men here. If they aren't treating women with respect, well, our whole education system has really fallen down, hasn't it? The notion that, anyway, so I think it's pretty obvious that that's a blatant lie. And what was fascinating about that Human Rights Commission, they spent $1 million on that survey, surveying people across Australia. Clearly you would expect people who have some experience with this. Of course we're dealing with a very serious problem here. Any rape is one too many. I'm not denying the importance of that issue. But what I'm saying is it would be most unusual if that sort of survey didn't attract people who had some experience with this problem and want to talk about it. So to say, the people who'd been raped didn't answer the survey doesn't really make much sense. And we got this really low incidence of rape. 99.2% of women on our campuses have had no experience with sexual assault. That definition included a bloke feeling you up on the train to uni. It didn't just include what happens at the uni. It included public transport. It included things like being tricked into sex against your will. It was the broadest possible definition to try to get the highest statistic they could, and they got 0.8%. Now I was the only journalist in Australia to write an article saying we should be celebrating our safe universities. And the rest of the mainstream media fell into line with the feminist narrative of saying, oh no, we've still got this huge problem of sexual violence at our universities, and they conflated sexual harassment with rape. And they deliberately disguised the statistics. And of course, if you look at what the harassment really is, it's mainly unwanted staring.
Right.
We have a big problem with unwanted staring at our universities, but I don't think that's a huge cause for an alarm.
Right. Okay.
Maybe if women wore a few more clothes, they wouldn't get as much unwanted staring.
Right. Okay. Why do you think?
That would be a Muslim solution to this problem, wouldn't it?
Right.
Bit of a burqa. Huh?
Yeah. Well, I assume that would, you wouldn't get a lot of stares. You wouldn't get a lot of people checking you out if you're in a burqa.
There you go.
Well, what do you think is the kind of reason why would the kind of feminist narrative be motivated to manipulate the statistics or fudge them or want that number inflated? What do you think the reason for that might be?
Look, we've seen this all play out in America, and that's what's fascinating about this whole debate. Obama, whatever it was, 10 years ago, say, almost a decade ago, required all publicly funded universities to adjudicate rape on campus.
Is that Title IX? Is that what it's called?
Under the Title IX anti-discrimination
Yeah.
legislation. So he wrote to all the universities and said they would, lose funding if they didn't move in this direction. To adjudicate rape using tribunals, using a lower standard of proof where men weren't offered normal legal protection and so on. And it's been a total disaster for the higher education sector in America. There's been, fairly recently, the universities lost their 100th case where the male student who'd been accused and his family sued the university and won for failure to protect his legal rights. Where he wasn't offered, the proper legal, a proper legal hearing. He wasn't, given full access to the details of the accusation. A whole range of things that must be done under criminal law didn't apply in this American tribunal system. And as a result of that, the Trump administration is now moving back, and they have announced a whole lot of changes, which are all about ensuring due process rights for young men, for wrongly accused young men on campus. So it's all played out in America. We saw exactly the same thing. We saw the fake statistics. We saw this attempt to present a rape scare campaign on university campuses. And we saw the university being bullied into taking over adjudication of rape. And we saw it turning out to be a disaster. Now, what the hell? How can our vice-chancellors, who presumably are trotting off to international conferences all the time and hobnobbing with the presidents of the American colleges, do you think they really don't know what happened there? I mean, they are such lily-livered wusses, the men running, mainly men, some women, running our universities, that they haven't got the guts to say to this tiny group of feminists, we're not going there. We know what happens if we go down this road. We will get our pants sued off us in 10 years' time. But no, they're all kowtowing to this feminist narrative. They're all the day after the Human Rights Commission survey was released, every vice-chancellor in the country was out there strutting away, pretending there's a rape crisis, saying, we've got a terrible problem of sexual violence, and we're going to introduce 24-hour rape crisis lines and sexual consent courses, and all this rubbish. I wrote to every vice-chancellor in Australia asking why they were lying about the safety of our campuses. And I got all these weasel words from the media units of the universities, saying nothing. I mean, no one would say why they were choosing to misrepresent this important issue. And it's all because of this lobby group, this tiny lobby group who's bullying the universities into shifting in this direction. Anyway, as I say, I just think it's really dangerous what's happening here, and someone has to speak out about it.
Yeah, well, in your book, you quote Christina Hoff Sommers, who goes by the name The Factual Feminist. Might be your American counterpart.
Oh, well, that's very flattering. She's a very well-known professor, but anyway.
And she talks about when it comes to sex, that men, that we've kind of flipped the innocent until proven guilty on its head, and that men are now guilty until proven innocent. And it kind of, it might relate a little bit to like the Me Too movement, in the sense that you have slogans coming out like "Believe the woman all the time" kind of thing. Do you feel like that's happening in Australia?
Oh, it's no question it's happening. I make YouTube videos, and I've already made 2 videos with male students who've been pursued by university committees. One of them was in Adelaide. A PhD student contacted me and he said, I've had this letter from a university committee saying I've been accused of rape. What do I do? And I found a criminal barrister to represent him pro bono, which was nice. And so we had 8 months warding off this committee, where the lawyer would tell him what to say, and they'd say, you have to appear at this meeting tomorrow, and he would write back and say, there's no obligation for me to do that. But it was really scary. That committee had the right to withhold this guy's PhD. So really serious consequences for him. And if people want to watch it, they can watch my YouTube video with him, which shows, because we ended up, it all came down to he had all the social media evidence saying the accusations didn't stand up, and a whole range of issues came involved. And Sorry, go on.
Sorry, well, there's an interesting point in your book where you talk about things like text messages before and after the event aren't allowed to be included in any of the cases or discussions, even when the girl has sent text messages saying, like, that was really fun last night, can't wait to see you again.
We had some of that evidence in that particular case, but I mean, that is one of the big feminist pushes to try to say social media evidence can't be used in rape cases, because that's usually what gets the accused let off.
Right.
You know, did you know about the Columbia mattress girl?
I just read that chapter.
I think we have to tell people about this.
Yeah, tell them the story.
Famous case. If you Google Columbia mattress girl...
Well, get Bettina's book, #Ben2, and read the chapter.
Read the chapter. Okay. Columbia mattress girl is about a girl who protested the fact that she felt Columbia University had not properly investigated her rape allegation. She'd accused a fellow student of anally raping and tried to strangle her, but it was exactly that sort of case. I think 2 days after that alleged event, there was a message from her to him saying she wanted to come to a party in his room. A month later, she's texting him or messaging him saying, you know, where are you, Paul? I love you. All these really positive messages. And the university investigated and decided it didn't hold up the idea that she was a rape victim. She objected to the decision made by Columbia, and for years carried her mattress around with her at the university. I was even allowed to take very croaky.
Well, in the book, you talk about she was even allowed to take it to her graduation ceremony. She was she was allowed to, I think, use it in her her visual arts course, because
she was given credit as performance art towards her visual arts major. And in the end, the guy who was accused and his family sued Columbia, and they were forced to make a big payout, apparently, and to apologise for failing to protect this guy's legal rights. And the funniest thing is, 2 weeks after that decision went through was the night that the day that the Human Rights Commission data was released here. And we had protests at Parliament House in Canberra, and they were all carrying their mattresses, which I thought was really funny. And this case had just gone down in Columbia.
Yeah. Okay. So what would your advice be to universities on this issue? What type of policies should they be looking at, or should they just leave it up to the police?
Look, I think there's a big difference. What we're seeing is this deliberate fudging of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and they're deliberately downplaying the figures, showing that there's very little sexual assault, very little rape, thank goodness, but there's comparatively high levels of low-grade harassment. And I don't see any problems if universities want to get involved in that territory. If they want to set up sexual consent courses, which they are, there's real problems with what they're teaching in those sexual consent courses, but I don't think it's a bad thing to educate people about this, to talk about, when is a woman likely to take offence at the way a guy looks at her or what a guy says to her, whatever it is. That's fine. That's part of, I suppose, supervising lots of young males and females who are interacting and making sure they all behave decently towards each other. But rape is a criminal offence for a very good reason. It's a really serious crime, which could mean the accused person could, end up in prison for years and years and years. We treat it seriously, and the universities have no business floundering around in rape cases, because not only are they risking, someone who's falsely accused not getting a fair hearing, but they risk a genuine rape victim not, interfering with the chances of her getting the conviction she wants. These people have no qualifications in investigating a rape case. It's a job for the police, and our police system now is bending over backwards to believe the victim. I mean, if you talk to people I know in the DPP, public prosecutors, who will say they don't dare, they push all rape cases through to trial just about these days, because they know the pressure is on them to always believe the victim, to take all these cases very seriously. They bend over backwards to, there were real problems with rape victims being traumatised by the process, and I think they're trying very hard to ensure victims, alleged victims, get dealt with in the most sympathetic, supportive way possible. But it's still a really serious crime that needs to be treated within the criminal law system.
Okay, so before we take it back to kind of the free speech issue, this is kind of what you talk about on the Fake Rape Crisis tour.
Yeah.
Is this what people could expect if you come to a university and they come to hear you speak?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about the statistics, and I talk about some of these cases. I've got a half a dozen other cases of people, young males being accused all around Australia, and I talk about some of those experiences that are happening, that are happening to them, and how appallingly badly the universities are treating them. And I think people need to know about that. But I also want part of what I do always is a Q&A. If people object to what I'm saying or have questions to ask me, I'm very happy to engage with them. This is not just about me telling them what to think. It's saying, what is going on here? If you have queries about what's going on here, come and talk to me about it. Let's have a discussion around this.